Welcome to Rising Up for Justice, a special weekly series presented by Rising Up with Sonali, an independently produced, subscriber-supported program syndicated to radio stations, free speech TV, and podcast platforms. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar, host and executive producer. Our nation and our world is overrun by billionaires and bigots, but they are few and we are many. On this series, exclusive to subscribers of Rising Up with Sonali and viewers of Free Speech TV, we'll hear from organizers in the movements for social justice and dig into the nuts and bolts of their values, strategies, tactics, narratives, and building power. I'm so pleased this week to invite Christine Neumann-Ortiz, founding executive director of Voces de la Frontera and Voces de la Frontera Acción. She serves on the board of a national coalition of the fair immigration reform movement and is a national leader in the immigrant rights movement overall. She's based in Wisconsin, and Voces de la Frontera is based also specifically in the state of Wisconsin. Welcome to the program, Christine.
Thank you so much, Sonali. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So I've spoken to you so many times before on my other show, Rising Up with Sonali. This time we're focusing on your organization rather than all of the scary issues that we usually talk about and, the news issues. Let's talk about Voces itself. As I mentioned, it's based in Wisconsin, but you have such a national profile now. You've really made the organization one that is a national contender. We think of the big sort of cities like LA and New York and Chicago as being centers of immigrant rights organizing, but you've really made Wisconsin stand out. How do you summarize the work that Voces de la Frontera does for our audience, including the main issue and your organizational goals?
Well, Voces de la Frontera, the reference means in Spanish, voices from the border, because even though I live in Wisconsin, I had spent time in Texas at the border there and had an opportunity to travel the border for a year and meet workers from the maquiladora industry that were organizing in a tri-national coalition that was, building alliances between Canadian, U.S., and Mexican workers, especially at the time of the free trade agreement when it was being signed in 1994. And even then, at that very beginning stage, you could already see, the kinds of abuses that were taking place in terms of exposure to the environment with and chemical exposure to workers who went unprotected, and just, poverty, despite people working really hard. And so that became, how people were organizing under those conditions. It really became the inspiration when I came back to Wisconsin to form kind of a worker center model. So within the immigrant rights movement, there are some of organizations that identify as a worker center. So really understand immigration as also very much a worker rights issue, national, international issue as well. And people are denied immigration status precisely because they are taking advantage of you make more money off undocumented workers. And it's, again, the same old game of divide and conquer. So that was really the inspiration. And it's been now, over 20 years since we've been here in Wisconsin. And I think what makes Voces unique in the immigrant rights movement, where there's a lot of love for the work that we have done, I think of two main areas in particular that I think stand out. And one of them is that in our fight for immigration reform, of which we have been doing with the Fair Immigration Reform Movement and other organizations as well, national entities, United We Dream, and so forth. All of these organizations are very democratic organizations. They're member-led organizations, and that's what's giving it, and that's what's given it power, and how it's made tremendous gains. In terms of being able to beat back, we are obviously in a very different moment right now, but this is you've had a very dynamic, strong movement for the last 20 years. And what Voces, I think, is unique is that we use the power of the statewide community general strike, known as, we call it Day Without Latinos and Immigrants, in different key moments. And so we've been able to beat back some really dangerous policies, like in Milwaukee County against 287G, which was going to deputize our local law enforcement, and here in Milwaukee County under the first Trump administration, and a state bill in 2017 under a gerrymandered Republican trifecta that was going to pass one of these anti-sanctuary bills, which is essentially almost the same thing, but statewide. And when the odds seemed impossible, we were able to overcome. And part of that is knowing the power that immigrants have as working people, leaning into our economic power. And so I use those two examples because they were very clear that we were able to, through the statewide general strike, really, like in 2017, tens of thousands of people went to the state capitol. It brought in, included like dairy workers, which are 70% of the workforce is undocumented. We are known as the dairy state. We have like big urban areas like manufacturing, but then also a big rural economy as well, of which immigrants and Latinos are very much a part of. And that was able to really, with that bottom up approach, it had a domino effect in terms of getting farmers to be aware, to support, and then to get their lobbying arm to support as well, and to be an active role. And the next day it was decided, the governor said, this is not a priority for Wisconsin. And it was at the point of being signed. Similarly, the combination of using this economic power with important coalitions that are unique to that area. So in Milwaukee, a lot of that was like with other communities that also were suffering in terms of the conditions in the county jail and so forth. And we formed a coalition, had another mass strike, and we were able to have that pulled, 287G, and force the resignation of the sheriff and bring in a new sheriff who to this day, now it's two sheriffs down, we have those protections in place, which we obviously need desperately. So that's one thing that's unique. The other thing is that we've used what's known as, like, kind of in the political world, relational organizing, which is just organizing people to build out over 30,000 voter network of people that more than likely wouldn't be participating in elections if it weren't for those personal connections and that trust and that support that comes through this very close network. And so it's been able to make an impact in many different election cycles. And in a swing state, that's, this group of Latinos, which we are predominantly Latinos, though our youth arm is multiracial, have really been able to make an impact. So I feel like those two things have been, important contributions, not just to Wisconsin, but also as a good model and inspiration to others.
And although the organization is obviously specific to Wisconsin, you have chapters in various Wisconsin cities, right? So you've expanded into cities. Tell me a little bit about that and link that to the fact that, as you said, you're a membership organization, so it's sort of quite democratic. How does that work? Do local chapters inform a national a strategy for the entire state that then informs your strategy on a national scale?
Yeah, we, as a member-led organization, we have grown our chapters, and it's been strategically because we all know we don't have unlimited resources or time. So we have created priorities, and so those priorities have really been in areas where we see a need and where there's a key, the population size is significant, and then we look at, political contributions, economic contributions, a need where there's there. And so we've grown, very much statewide. And then part of that representation then in terms of democratic decision making comes through, and we have an annual assembly, we have geographic chapters, and then we have representation by those geographies into our statewide elected board, and by program as well. And so, like, the Essential Worker Rights Network was something where we decided to double down after the pandemic, because we saw immigrants were essential workers, but there was a great need for people for protections and all that. And just in the absence of immigration reform, a 20-year fight. That is our main fight. It has been because it's what's needed. And so it's a long-term fight, but that's been, so we have our youth arm, Youth Empowered in the Struggle. Most recently, we formed a kind of young adult arm, again, formed by our own members, that really responds to the needs of the community. And so we've had like programs that are developed based on the needs of the community. And so all of that is voted on at our annual assembly. And then kind of the strategic tactical questions as they come up or on an ongoing basis are decided at the chapter level, or anything of a serious nature, such as a call for a community-wide strike, is voted on by all of our members and our elected board.
Let's talk a little bit about the youth arm. That sounds really interesting and fascinating. We've mostly, I remember there was maybe 10, 20 years ago, the discussion around immigration and youth revolved around the so-called Dreamers, right? Which then pushed President Obama to sign the executive order that created the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. A lot of those folks are now not even young adults, they're sort of middle-aged maybe, or getting, to be 30, in their 30s, 40s. Where is the new youth movement, in your opinion, specific to Wisconsin? What does it look like? What are their goals? And how are they setting about pushing your organization forward?
Yeah, I mean, in Wisconsin, we do have quite a young population. And then within the Latino community, it's like kind of disproportionately younger. So it's very dynamic, I would say, the youth-based organizing, and obviously very intentional work that's being done. But in our case, Youth Empowered in the Struggle has been around almost as long as like when Voces started. And again, very organically started by a high school teacher. So that's like, our chapters are primarily in high schools, and then and now in colleges. And there are, of course, other organizations that also have a youth component. But in our case, it just became naturally multiracial. So while our kind of more adult-based work is very much rooted in like blue-collar Latino working class folks, a lot of the youth work, because it's based geographically in our schools primarily, it's very diverse, and it definitely reflects like new waves of the asylum seekers and refugees that have come in. So tremendous diversity, and Black, working class white, U.S. citizen, Latinos, children of immigrants, DACA recipients, Dreamers, those that were excluded. And so it's, the work, at least in our case, that we have done, you have in the public school system large numbers of low-income families. And so like the students did a survey of their peers. What is your top concern? And the top concern was food justice. So having quality, culturally appropriate, and enough food for lunch. And so it's really been, a long-term campaign where they've, done all of the work. They've participated in the past in school board elections. They've lobbied elected officials. It's representative. So just, that strong, they've told their stories to the media, to the elected officials at these meetings that they've had, public meetings when votes are being taken. And so they've been able to win representation at the school board level to implement this program. At another school, it had to do with the fact that they were just doing digital. They switched to you needed a phone and a credit card to get into activities for the school, and that excluded a whole bunch of people around language, technology, resources, and something you'd think, wow, we just need to bring this to their attention, and this will be taken care of. And isn't it a great thing that people are stepping forward and communicating that? Because surely you want to know that. And we were like, I'll just speak for myself. I was really surprised that there was resistance to that, like hard resistance. And so there was a real public campaign around this, and ultimately we're able to prevail. Under this current environment, a key part has been around our top priority. I mentioned immigration reform is like the big one, but our top priority now, of course, as we know, has been community defense, building out community defense networks, not just, as an organization, but also citywide and in all
And
of
actually,
these places.
that's a good segue to ask you. Although this conversation is intended to center on what your organization is doing long term, just given the current reality, give us a sense of how ICE raids have impacted Wisconsin and how Voces de la Frontera has pushed back and organized. I'd love to hear about the community defense work, because we've seen in Portland, in Chicago, in LA, and New York, but we haven't heard as much about states, landlocked states like Wisconsin.
Yeah, yeah. We do have Lake Michigan
Oh, that's
right
true.
next to us. And so unfortunately, Customs and Border Patrol is one that almost the entire state is considered a border state
Right,
because
because
it's
of the way in which
right.
they've expanded the definition of border, which is just bizarre in such a large country that a state like Wisconsin would be considered a border state.
Yeah, and that means with the Customs and Border Patrol that they have a bigger, a presence, can have a bigger presence, which obviously that's the big shift that's happened most recently to like escalate the campaign of terror and deportations, bringing in not just ICE, but Customs and Border Patrol to play a more aggressive role. But I think given the first round under the Trump administration for here in Wisconsin, we immediately set up that infrastructure that we had before, which was we call it the Community Defense Network, and it is like kind of three main pieces. Would be setting up all these trainings for volunteers to quickly scale up on one of them being obviously the know your rights, so that if they come to your home, you don't have to just let them in, you don't have to answer questions, and all of those really important things that can make a difference between someone who's quickly deported and someone who can fight their deportation, or someone who can be in solidarity with another person by affirming these rights that we all have. And so the Know Your Rights, we set up a Train the Trainer. We've now trained since November of last year, over 35,000 people on Know Your Rights, and a subset of people on Train the Trainer. And then the other piece has been we created a statewide 1-800-ICE hotline. We're really grateful for a partner organization that really had a good system in place, and we're able to learn from each other, and now have 150 volunteers. There's a multilingual aspect that you can use for any language as well, if the call comes in, and that's for ICE sightings only, or in real time if something's happening. The third component has really been like Migra Watch or ICE Watch, and so we've also trained up around a similar number of close to 200 people so far, to be able statewide to be able to be a network of people who, once something is, if we get a call and we know that there's a likelihood, we should check this out, then it's sending people on the ground to document what's happening, as we have seen on social media, all of the amazing documentation that has been so important to raise awareness, to challenge these lies, and to litigate these abuses, and be inspired also in different ways. People are we've learned from one another. So we've also set up around Know Your Rights. I guess I'll just take a look. Another component just quickly has been around workplace. If they come as to say, hey, so that element too. But the Migra Watch is that, and also to connect with families who are being impacted. And so that's kind of at the base. And then the other piece is building out a rapid response, people trained up on nonviolent direct action. And we've seen a lot of this already. And I think it's because it's for many, it's been an organized movement for a while, but really, being able to scale up, and it's different in the sense of who can use their privilege as a U.S. citizen for certain things, like Migra Watch, like rapid response, like protest, where some people now are obviously who are higher risk, are not inclined to, to do that. But not everyone has to do the same thing. And we can all recruit people to play different roles and to have very, very organized neighborhoods, schools, workplaces. And so that's really the democratic work that's happening. And obviously the theme of, the people, el pueblo salva al pueblo, the people save the people, that it's really like that kind of like grassroots democracy and discipline is very powerful. And we've seen, the different ways and the beautiful creativity that's also come out of it that I think is so important. And that's been our primary work right now, working not just as an setting up, helping to support that community defense network structure statewide, but then Milwaukee, we anticipate we are considered a target for another military occupation. So really working with other organizations citywide to just scale everything up. But then also thinking, that's kind of the immediate issue. And, for us kind of long term, the around and elections are coming next year. Like we have 4 major elections from school boards to governor to congressional. It's like state Supreme Court, which has been really important. So Latinos, for example, in our case, which is a big part of our case, or youth, are very key constituency as voters in a state that is a swing state. And so reminding people of what those connections are. Like we've had a great success on beating back 287G at a local level statewide, with communities coming together and forming quickly and discovering that they're either their chief, the chief of police or sheriff signed an agreement to be part of deputized as ICE in return for lots of money. And we've seen success. There was Walworth County, Clark County, Palmyra, the city of Palmyra, the city of Eagle, just this year alone, with 4 areas, jurisdictions that were able to get their local law enforcement to back off because there was such a strong community response, and obviously wanting to be proactive to say no to this. So that, just appreciating who's that, who is your alder person, who is, that mayor, or if that's in a village. And obviously at the county level, we've seen important policy in this moment that we're in, the fight against authoritarianism and upholding our rights, because if we don't use them, we will lose them, and expanding those protections. So having that boldness and creativity. So we have been inspired by, we have elected officials that are looking at, how ICE has not been allowed to stage in city or county properties. So where that's possible to do that, winning in one new county apart from Milwaukee and Dane, Janesville, a sheriff there said he's now using the judicial warrant standard, which it's good. And that's the ideal thing. You're not just saying we're not going to do it, but it's actually saying, we will only collaborate if there's an order with ICE, if there's an order signed by a judge, because the person has gone through there's been due process, and it is probable cause for a crime of a serious nature, and only under those circumstances. And so having that kind of level of protection, and there are, Wisconsin is, we just recently won fair maps in 2023 because of state Supreme Court elections, the last 2. We got 2 more coming up, but we've been able to we were one of the most gerrymandered states in the country since 2011 to 2023, which made things very hard to achieve, and basically nearly impossible at the state level. But now there's been tremendous advances and greater accountability. And so policies like a package of bills called Keep Families Together would actually force ICE to, not be masked, identify themselves. It would uphold the judicial warrant standard in state spaces, bring back the sensitive locations where they cannot interrogate people in or around, like schools and churches and clinics, and it would outlaw 287G.
Well, we're nearly out of time. I want to ask you, Christine, where can people find out more about Voces de la Frontera? How can they support the work that you're doing, whether they're in Wisconsin or outside?
Oh, thank you. So you can go to our website. It's Voces de la Frontera, but it's the acronym, the initials, VDLF.org. We are also on Facebook and Instagram, but the website is a good place in terms of supporting the organization because one area, if folks can do maybe a fun fundraiser or just individually make a contribution, we do have on our website under donate a link to our legal defense fund, and that has been very important. It's helped us and again, it's not like kind of, you can't use really grant-based money for that. And so all those, donations really are making a difference. So an example of that would be with, we had a strike of artisan cheesemakers because an E-Verify program was put into place, which we supported, and we were able to raise around $20,000 basically as a little mini strike fund till they were able to transition. But, they had support. They were able to speak out and again highlight how we need immigration reform, and mass deportation is just, is taking us to hell in a basket faster. Yeah. If we want a future, then it's not just morally right. It's, economically, we everyone benefits from, having a working good immigration reform system. So, but anyhow, that's one example. But there's been other individuals who've been too poor to get their DACA renewal, or been too poor to get their green card renewal. And so that little bit of $500 has been, a profound difference. So, we really appreciate, I think that would be a great contribution. It's definitely going to the community that needs it the most at this moment in the fight around immigration.
Well, we'll post a link to that from our website. But I want to thank you so much, Christine, for joining us today. Best of luck to you.
Thank you, Sonali. I appreciate all the good work that you're doing.
My guest has been Christine Neumann-Ortiz, founding executive director of Voces de la Frontera and Voces de la Frontera Action, based in Wisconsin. She also serves on the board of the National Coalition of the Fair Immigration Reform Movement, and she's considered a national leader in the immigrant rights movement. This is Rising Up for Justice, and I'm Sonali Kolhatkar, host and executive producer of this new weekly half-hour series, exclusive to viewers of Free Speech TV and subscribers of my long-standing program, Rising Up with Sonali. Find out more at risingupwithsonali.com.